Good morning. Thank you again for joining us for our virtual service and for this part of the service, the sermon. It's it's difficult to be separate from everybody, but it's also at least a touchstone when we gather once a week to remember that we do care about each other and about our world. Right now, the sermon series that we're going through is the Sermon on the Mount. We're walking through almost verse by verse of the Sermon on the Mount with the intention of getting to the roots of our tradition. We see so many toxic forms of Christianity in such visible places right now that there's something both, I think, medicinal, healing, medical about remembering the roots of the religion in this Sermon on the Mount, but also for our own humanity. And I think every religion has some version of a Sermon on the Mount that just gives you a sense of home in the middle of all the insanity that religion can provoke. So we're walking through, today we're looking at what Jesus says about Scripture. And this is very interesting because Jesus says here that he's not coming to take away the law and the prophets, that he's not going to change, it says, a jot or a tittle. And the only time I've ever heard those words, jot or tittle, have been sermons on this verse. Basically what they refer to is something in Hebrew like the dot on an I, the cross on a T, little slashes and dots that flesh out words. And what we may be looking at in this verse is Matthew, who's very traditional, trying to let listeners know that Jesus isn't as radical as it seems. And I think the truth is both, that Jesus cares about his traditions, he cares about his people, his vocabulary, his language, all of that thing. He's going to teach through his culture. But he wants to take people to a place that's universal. And I think we need both of those. We need that kind of handle on things sometimes, a sense of something tangible, something we can understand and carry with us, but also something that opens up into the whole of things and isn't just an isolated kind of silo in which we're hiding from life. So we're going to look at Scripture and ask the question, why do we still keep Scripture? And I think it's a very important question for us to ask because there's so many problems that we see in the world right now coming from biblical literalism. People who lift verses out of Scripture and then say these people shouldn't be included, or this evil practice can be found in Scripture, therefore it's not really evil. I remember Steve Allen when I was a kid. He was a comedian on television a long time ago. And he said this of Scripture. He said, "There's scarcely a page of the Bible on which an open mind does not perceive a contradiction, an unlikely story, an obvious error, a historical impossibility of one sort or another." And, it's easy to be have unquestioning faith if you've never read the Bible. If you're just taking your preacher's word for it, it's real easy to be a literalist. But when you actually read the book from cover to cover, like Steve Allen is saying, it jolts you. I mean, I remember my family went on vacation when I was maybe in junior high, something like that. And I took a Bible with me and I started reading it from cover to cover. And I was amazed and both horrified by the monstrosity that were described there, the contradictions from one page to the next, but also this wonderful, mysterious story that, for all of its imperfections, took me to a deeper place within myself and a deeper understanding of who I am. So I want to bring those two things together, to not forget that the struggle we're having today over whether to take down Confederate statues or not is very much tied to a biblical interpretation that said slavery was biblical. a biblical interpretation that said women are made to bear children and therefore should not have reproductive rights over their own lives. I mean, it doesn't take long to find all kinds of evil ways the Bible has been misused against people, to shut down science and all of that. So again, we're asking a living question. Why don't we just chunk the Bible away and start over again and just start with nothing but good stuff? I think that's a logical question. Bishop Tutu in South Africa is a Christian, loves Scripture, but he also realizes the danger of Scripture. So he once famously said that we in Africa, speaking of himself and his people there in South Africa, he said, when the white people arrived on our continent, we had the land and they had the Bibles. When they left, we had the Bibles and they had the land. And I think when you look at the history of colonization that's been yoked so much with the Bible, I think it's a living question to say, why not just start from scratch? There's so much baggage that we're bringing with us. Why not just throw this thing overboard and start again? And again, it looks like Jesus is saying, I'm not going to change anything important about Scripture. But it's critically important to realize he's about to launch into a radical redefinition of religion. He's going to say, you've heard it said, don't kill. I say, don't hate. You've heard it said, don't commit adultery. I say, don't look at other people as objects. So there's going to be a radical redefinition, but you don't have to lose your roots to get to this kind of mystical unity, universalism. Because you're going to speak some language, you're going to have some history, and all of that's good if you're outgrowing the past. So I think what's being said here is Jesus is going to give us a starting place. Scripture gives us a starting place. He's not condemning Judaism and saying we're going to outgrow Judaism and start a new religion. There are lots of Jewish people around the world who are already saying this when Jesus says it. It's saying you can be Jewish and universal. You can be Christian and universal. You can be atheist and universal. And the point is, whatever your particular expression of humanity is, needs to blossom and open up. And Scripture can be a way of helping that to happen. Jesus, on the one hand, is saying, I'm not changing anything. And yet, he's going to do a radical redefinition of what ethics means. He's going to heal on the Sabbath. Literally, the law says not to do that on the Sabbath. And yet, the purpose of the Sabbath was for healing. He's trying to say this. Sometimes you have to violate the letter of the law to get to the spirit of the law, the essence. Excuse me. And if you're worried about me coughing in my hand, there's nobody in the building. So I'm only infecting myself. So, but this idea of you have to let go of the literal to get to the spiritual is pivotal to understanding any healthy religion. Any healthy religion. It's true of Judaism. And that's what he's saying he's not letting go. The prophets have already said this. There's no point in doing legalistic and literalistic religion if it doesn't lead you to love and to justice. Didn't start with Jesus. That started with the prophets of every faith, of every religion around the world. He's going to say you have to let go of the form of things to get to the flow of things. If you're learning how to dance, it's really hard to start if you don't learn steps. If you're trying to learn to play guitar, it's really hard to learn to play guitar if you don't learn chords. And it starts off very mechanical and very wooden often. But there comes a moment when the music happens through you, where the dance happens through you, where the painting happens through you. It's no longer paint by numbers. So the form is important as a starting point. The stories of religion are important to start that conversation. But they should never be a prison from which we can't move into a better future. I think that's what Jesus is saying. Literally in Greek, ironically, the literal words that Jesus is using, you realize can't be taken literally. He's not coming to destroy. The word he's going to use to fulfill is pleroma. And this is a word that you see in mystical religions, the Greek mystery religions. You see forms of it all over the world. It means wholeness, fullness. But it's not your idea of unity. It's a kind of kindred spirit, a sense of melting into something bigger than you are. Our ideas of unity, our ideas of righteousness are things we fight about. If they come from a kindred spirit, we're in a very different situation. So until I can forget the steps, I'm not really dancing. Until I forget the motions, I'm not really painting. And until I forget the rules a little bit, I'm not doing ethics. I'm not getting past the notes on the page to get to the music that's intended. And again, this word pleroma is very important for understanding Christianity. It's one of the things that have fallen out. At some point, it's leading us not just to a philosophical truth or religious truth, but to reality itself, which is life, which is nature. And we can't understand it because we're parts of it. We're within it. So we have to dissolve into it. We have to humbly kind of melt into our background a bit. And I think that's the trick of great religious teachers, is to start where we are with our frightened little selves, our arrogant little selves, and give us the confidence where we can melt into something bigger than ourselves. It's a feeling you've had in forests where you just kind of melt into the background. Maybe you've had it when you're looking at the sky, the stars, and you tried to understand it with your mind and you just kind of melted into the whole of things. It's happened when you've maybe looked into the eyes of a child and you just kind of melt and you go deeper into something that life you understand is more profound than you understand. But usually we need some kind of a starting point. And that's where religion can be very helpful. Not as the last word, but as the first word. So Jesus at one point says his word is like a seed. I think that's very, very important. The point is not to eat the seed itself. The point is to let the seed go into the ground and become something else. And that's always been its purpose. The purpose of the firecracker was always for it to explode. The purpose of the aspirin was always for it to dissolve into medicine that your body can absorb. And we too have this larger purpose that we don't necessarily intend, that we don't necessarily understand, but that we feel drawn to melt into, to go into. In Hinduism, the way they try to get this across is the idea of an elephant, where somebody takes in a baby elephant into their house and then they feed it and grow it, and it keeps growing till it's too big to fit out the door again. And all of a sudden they realize this elephant's going to destroy my whole house. Well, that's what Scripture is supposed to do to the ego. It looks at one level like it's something that you can use and fit into your life, but it leads you to something bigger than yourself. And again, that's that idea of the pleroma. In Taoism, this is how I think they express that idea of the oneness. There was something undifferentiated and yet complete, which existed before heaven and earth. Soundless and formless, it depends on nothing and does not change. It operates everywhere and is free from danger. It may be considered the mother of the universe. I do not know its name. I call it Tao. It forced me to give it a name. If forced to give it a name, I shall call it great. Now, being great means functioning everywhere. Functioning everywhere means far-reaching. Being far-reaching means returning to the original point. And this is that kind of maddening and wonderful paradox that you see through religion, where it's trying to give you both the starting place that you can hold like a handle in your hand, and then something you trust enough to just kind of relax into, to melt into this ocean of life and being. When Jesus says the word, referring to this, whatever this sacred intelligence is, realize that what we call scripture hadn't been written yet. If he's talking about any scripture, he's talking about the Jewish scripture. But I think he's talking about something deeper than even that, which is the intelligence within things. It's whatever it is that shapes the periodic chart. Right? It's whatever the intelligence or patterning nature that replicates DNA and keeps a central pattern going through the chaos of life and living. I think it is pivotal that religion not collapse in on itself. That when we think of truth, that we realize that something like Jesus or Buddha or Lao Tse or any of the great teachers aren't trying to build a prison for our mind to live in. They're trying to release us from our small ideas of life and invite us into this great ocean of life. But to do that, we have to realize that the traditions we have, the ideas we've been given, are in some ways our only starting place. But if we take them literally, we never get out of them. Right? That they then become a prison. So I think when Jesus says, I'm not taking anything away from the tradition, he's taking a lot away, but he's also leading us to the heart of that tradition. The heart of Judaism, the heart of paganism, the heart of humanity. That's what great teachers do. And scripture is sort of like a stained glass window. When you look at a stained glass window, it can be very inspirational. It can inspire all kinds of intuition and imagination. But if you try to perceive the world through the stained glass, then most of the world will be incomprehensible to you. If you look at science through religion, if you look at history through religion, if you look at politics through religion, it's like trying to see through a stained glass window. But if we go into that deep, profound, mystical place, with the willingness to let go of that and go out into the world, then religion in many ways can give us the key to our own heart. And that's what we're looking for. So Jesus says, if you're going to get where you want to go, to a religion of love that does justice, you have to be better than the Bible thumpers. The word there is Pharisees, but I think if I were translating it, it would be fundamentalist. And we all think we've got the fundamentals, right? We all think we understand what the essence is. But there's also a sense we have to let go of our idea of unity before we can have true unity. We have to understand that it's more a sense of a kindred spirit, of a universalism, than it is of orthodoxy. So in the passage, when Paul is talking about this thing, saying the letter of the law kills, the spirit of the law frees, gives life. He's saying that Moses never meant to reduce the word, the law, the pattern, the intelligence of the cosmos down to stone tablets. That was for human beings so we could grasp it. That gave us the handle. But the word has always been written in our human hearts, in our hearts of flesh. It's what helps us know the tie that binds us to other animals, to plants. It's something deeper and more profound than religion. But religion can be an incredibly helpful way of staying in touch with that. So how do we know we're on the right path? I think the key is, Jesus says, it makes us more loving. That when we let Scripture work on us, when it starts conversations in our community that make us more loving, more concerned about justice, more alive, more aware, then we know we're on the right path. And the key, I think Jesus is saying today, is you don't have to lose your language, your traditions. You just have to have them be the starting place and outgrow them into there's room for everybody. All the birds of the air, all the fish of the sea, all the people on earth are part of your worldview. And you know you're on that path when you look at Scripture and you don't feel a call telling you what to do or what to think. but instead you feel like you've been given the keys to your own heart. So thank you for spending this time with us. Go in peace.